Hello and welcome to another week of the Promax Asia webinar. This week we have with us a group of astute and successful women from our industry. But before my colleague brings them on, a quick announcement. Promax Asia Award is calling for entries. We have introduced 4 new categories, 2 of which, Best Work Never Seen and Best Campaign Never Seen, are free to enter. Head on down to our website at www.promaxasia.tv for more details. And remember to take advantage of our early bird rates. Okay, as always, if you have any question that you'd like to ask our guests, hit that Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window to leave your questions or upvote questions that are already there, and we'll take them at the end. Okay, now over to my colleague in Hyderabad, Richa.
Thanks, Andy. Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to Promax Asia's Creative Playbook, a series of webinars where we have insightful conversations and cutting-edge content with an amazing panel of experts from around the world and across different disciplines. Today's discussion is on reinventing news for young India. It promises to be rich, fun, where we dissect and unpack all the necessary tools for keeping India's youth engaged. Joining me today are 3 very special guests, Ritu Kapur, Faye D'Souza, and our host for the webinar, Richa Arora. As we all know, Ritu Kapur is the co-founder and the CEO of the Quint. Her sharp insights on young audiences is one of the key reasons for Quint's success today and for driving digital innovation. Faye D'Souza is an award-winning journalist who changed the way news is covered on Indian television. And now with her new venture, we can expect her to make headlines even in the online space. Faye is the journalist of the millennium, young, fresh, brutally honest. Our host for today is Richa. She is the co-founder of Metapixel Studios and is an award-winning environment filmmaker. Richa's solid content, journalism, and production experience is the reason why she works with so many online news companies, brands, and streaming platforms. Trust me, these 3 lovely ladies know content like no one does. Please join me in welcoming our guests, and it's a great pleasure to have you with us today. Over to you, Richa.
Thank you so much, Rajika. Welcome everyone to a very special webinar that spotlights a very definite shift in India's media industry today. A shift that has largely been propelled by easy and cheap internet access and a very savvy millennial audience, making a third of our population and looking to consume news on their own terms. They like to interact with their news, and the good news is that you cannot soft pedal fake news and disinformation to them. You can win them over, however, with solid storytelling and some old-fashioned, unbiased journalism. Both Ritu and Faye are engaging with young India every hour, and they are in the process of breaking down every familiar notion of news and content. They more than anyone else understand that young India is not easy to please. Welcome, Ritu and Faye. Let me go to the first part of the discussion right away. Both of you are former TV executives who consciously decided to move beyond TV in search of an online audience. What was the process of unlearning like? Ritu, tell us about how you went about creating an entire ecosystem where there was space for both journalistic excellence and sharp millennial content.
When we that was 2015 when we exited Network 18. We knew that the next thing we do has to still got to do with news content, but it has to be digital. Because it was clear that everyone's now consuming content on their handheld devices. But what was also clear to us after having spent 20 odd years in trying to reach out to SE-Sec, a 40 plus male, which used to make my blood boil, my focus very clearly was that, the presumption that young India is not interested in news or does not want to, engage with current affairs issues, we thought was not true. And we said that we are now going to build a product which is news for young India to be consumed on a mobile phone. And that's how we started. That was the premise. And the unlearning was really about unlearning how to do video for digital, because video is what, as broadcasters, video is what we knew, and video is what we've done for years, for decades. The whole thing was unlearning video. That was a real challenge.
Right. Faye, you always
Yes.
add a disclaimer. Oh, thank you so much, Ritu. Faye, you always add a disclaimer before starting your daily news update on your YouTube channel. And you say, this is not the place where we pit people against each other. Why do you think that disclaimer is important?
Because I think that it's important to tell people we're not doing that debate format anymore. I did it, to be completely fair, I did it myself in television for 3 years. We tried to put a spin on it where basically we didn't allow guests to talk over each other and there wasn't a lot of shouting. But I don't believe it's useful. It's informative. So it doesn't serve, that format doesn't serve any purpose for the viewer. And I also believe it's really bad for the mental health of the anchor, of the entire team of the people who are working on it, the guests and the viewers. I mean, I'd hate for people to be consuming that kind of like shouty, fighty sort of content just before they go to bed. So, and what happens is invariably people just assume that if you're talking, like if this is a discussion, there must be a debate, because that's just where everybody's minds go. So it's an attempt to constantly reinforce that we've not got people to fight against each other. In fact, we've got different points of view on the same matter. So for example, if we're discussing China and India and what's happening at the border or the LAC, we'd bring in somebody with diplomatic experience, we'll bring in someone with defense experience, we'll bring in someone with strategic communication experience, and someone with economic experience. So thereby, by listening to all of these people, you'll get a full, sort of 360 view on what is going on, because actually there are different facets to every story. But it's not a debate where you design your panel in such a way that two people disagree with each other and then, they sort of yell at each other by the end of it. So obviously, I don't want people coming into the program and then sort of leaving because they think it's a debate. So the idea is to just clarify at the beginning that this is what it is. This is what we're going to attempt to do. But I think that, after leaving television, or one of the reasons why I left television, I just felt that it no longer informed people. And that was my, fundamental problem. I believe that TV at this point is too stretched. It's expensive. So, teams are working very, very hard. They're very thin teams. They don't have the time and the energy and the allowance to give real love to any of their stories. So there's no real research, there's no real effort going in because there's just no time. You're feeding this 24/7 monster. And the formats that are being used on television right now are only stirring up hate. They're not answering questions, which is what they should be doing. We should be informing people. So my whole point of leaving television, starting off with digital, is to create an organization that simply focuses on information, to get you as much information from as many credible voices as we can, so that as a young person, you feel informed, you feel empowered by the fact that your decision is based on solid information and research and fact-checking, and that gives you a sense of pride. So it's that sense of pride really that we're chasing, that we want to be able to deliver.
So that really brings me to my second question, which is about busting some myths about this audience. Who is this audience? What do they want? And why is it so tough to please them? Ritu, you've been doing this. You interact with them every single hour. Tell us.
So it is an audience, like Faye said, that wants fact, that needs information. I think in an environment where there is just so much opinion, there's so much just point of view, which is also, fueling a lot of polarization. It's all about divided views, polarized views. I think they're looking for clarity in that environment. I do believe that they haven't yet fallen into the trap of echo chambers, which a lot of other journalists have, apart from people of older people who consume content of television or newspapers. And I think they want to participate. which is why that has been a core part of how we set out the Quint. It's extremely participative. It started, it actually came from the young, the idea of making the platform far more participative. When the JNU dissent debate happened, and there was that whole crackdown on the students with all kinds of accusations. And there was, young India was at that time looking for outlets where they could put their point of view, and they wanted something that was mainstream, which clearly newspapers and broadcasters do not make the space for that. You know, in my little way at CNN IBN, what was then CNN IBN, I created the Citizen Journalist Show, which was one little place for avenue for people's issues to come up. And that's when we realized that we virtually became like a blogging platform, which obviously with editorial vetting and verification process kicking in as well. And that's when we realized that they don't want to be passive consumers of content, because they've grown up on social media platforms where you comment, interact, share, like, subscribe, etc., etc., etc. So and remember, the mobile phone is a communication device. It's not a consumption device like a television screen is. And that also determines how young India interacts. So they don't consume news, they interact with news and content. The other really, really important thing is most of broadcast and most of, I think, consumption of newspapers is largely male. What is a point of pride for us at the Quint is that we have the highest women audience in English news content on these, because this is the one place. Otherwise, it's always, like I said, SECA 40+ male. Every time we would try and pick up a women's issue, we were constantly told that there is no audience for that. So I think that's the other place. It's also a place where there are challenges of women and internet access in our country, but we have seen a huge outpouring of women coming forth, of the younger TG, and interacting. So they don't want to be given opinions, but they would like to share their opinion. They like being guided towards a point of view with fact, but it's not about, and I think that's what they're looking for. I think there's just too much opinion. There's just way too much opinion and too many slanging, prime time, shouting, slanging matches. I think that's what they are looking for. And they do not consume news in any other platform. For instance, now their biggest, a recent studies show that one of the biggest platforms for news consumption is now Instagram. And that's interesting, that it's very pictorial in everything that's posted, whether it's coming from individuals or whether it's coming from news sites. It's very pictorial, right? So there's a lot of visual interaction with content. And which is why, we at the Quint are very, very clear that our primary content type has to be video, pictures, interactives. We have a Quint lab where we fool around with formats in which we can use technology to get the young to interact with, sort of a gamification of content as well, if you can call it that. And it's not the, unlike English news television channel where it's the 6 metros, this is a tier 2, tier 3, young, aspirational, hungry audience that is coming to the internet. And that's definitely coming to the Quint.
Nice. Faye, you are also interacting primarily on Instagram. What is your community like? What do they want? What are they looking at?
I think the word millennial right now can be stretched to sort of include anyone who believes that they don't fit, in the mainstream anymore, right? So if we look at the audience, at least the breakup of my audience on Instagram, and when I left television, I had about 35,000 followers on Instagram this was October last year. And we're now, I just checked, at 560,000 followers. And this has come from simply just writing the news on Instagram. And I remember sitting at home because I was on what they call gardening leave, which is, it was grounded by the organization that I had left. So I couldn't do anything. So I was sitting at home, and out of frustration of what I was seeing happen on television, I started writing what I call news that should be the headlines today on Instagram. And it became really popular. And it started becoming a primary source of information for a lot of people. So then I started doing it, with more dedication. But now that I look at, we open up the analytics on the Instagram page and look at what we have like 52% women. We've got the largest chunk of the audience is between the age of 15 and 35. So technically, if you looked at what millennial is, it would be a much smaller sliver of that pie. So we've got 16 to 35. It trickles right up to 45, but the numbers become smaller after 35. And I think that those numbers might exist more on Facebook than they do on Instagram. I believe that the word really for this let's just call them millennials, but for these people is authenticity. They feel like they want to feel like you're being honest to them.
Right.
So they respond to honest apologies. They respond to vulnerability that's displayed by people. They respond to genuine sort of coming clean about your life in some ways. So for me and for my team, we've picked that word authenticity in the sense that the tone is the same tone as I speak to you with, unlike the tone that we used to use on television. The way we write, the way we communicate, that whether it is text or audio or AV or whatever it is, the voiceovers are as close to real life as we can make them. We write them in a way that I would explain to you if you and I were sitting across a table, over a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, as the case may be, and actually talking about what happened on a particular story. We try and make it that real. And the more real it is, the more response we get from the millennial audience. And I think this is coming from the place that they feel lied to all the time. There is a sense of being taken for a ride by mainstream media, being taken for a ride by various government agencies, by government, by you just feel there's a sense of people feeling constantly cheated. And just to be able to, just give them the truth and say, hey, you know what, this is what it is. And there are days when I'll actually write that, listen, I don't have, today I'm unwell and there's nobody on my team, so we're not putting out the news today. And it's received really well. I remember we did a couple of brand deals during the lockdown. And I put out this brand deal that I did with Ariel, where I had to get my husband to do the laundry, which was nice. It was an added bonus, really. And when I put it up on Instagram, and I told people, that this is a way in which we're going to make money so we can keep the news real. And there was really positive response from the audience saying, hey, I'm happy this is happening because I want to see you do well and I want you to continue to give us the news. So this way I know that you're going to be viable and you're going to continue. And this was a really mature sort of response to come from the audience. So compared to say a Twitter, which is a more angry space. So I think that the word authentic is going to become really important and is really the core of what the millennial audience responds to and what they want. They just want you to be honest with them. And the more honest you are, the closer they will feel to you.
Correct. Also, they are much smarter than we think. They are way smarter than we think. Correct.
I think it's important to also realize. Sorry, it's important to realize that these are young people who were born into the internet. Right? You and I discovered. I mean, so forgive me for just assuming you and I are the same age. But the internet.
I'm younger then.
The internet came into my life when I was in college, in junior college. Right? And, I remember we had to go to like a internet cafe and write emails to each other. But these kids were born into this world. So having information, at their fingertips is who they are. So they have a very high sense of, a keen sense of a bullshit meter, saying that, we don't believe this. So they're very willing to call out nonsense. And I think that a healthy respect for that instinct is where one needs to start if we're going to, do content for this market.
Absolutely. Also, before we dive into the content strategy, Chu, can we please play Quint's Rohingya animation video just to get, the audience enthused about what Quint does and Faye's Inside Chem, hugely popular Inside Chem hospital.
मेरा नाम तस्मीदा है, मैं एक रोहिंग्या रिफ्यूजी हूँ। एक दिन मिलिट्री के कुछ लोग आए और पापा को जेल ले गए। जो बिजनेस करते हैं, जिसके पास पैसा होता है, उनको उठा के लेके जाते हैं। रास्ते में चेकिंग के लिए मिलिट्री होते हैं, तो उनको रोक के पूछा कि कहाँ जा रहे हो। जिस दिन मैं बर्मा से निकली, वो मेरा बर्मा का लास्ट डे था। कॉलेज तो सभी जाते हैं, लेकिन इंडिया में 40,000 रोहिंग्या मैं बस अकेली हूँ जो अभी कॉलेज जा रही हूँ। बचपन से तो मुझे डॉक्टर का बहुत शौक था, मैं डॉक्टर बनूंगी। मैंने सोचा फिर डॉक्टर से अच्छा पॉलिटिक्स अगर मैं पढ़ूंगी तो आगे जाके मैं अपने लोगों के लिए कुछ कर सकती हूँ। तो मैं आगे जाके ह्यूमन राइट एक्टिविस्ट बनना चाहती हूँ।
This is there. Before we come to the most important section, content strategy. I know that both of you are news executives, TV news, and I remember when I used to be in NDTV, news and content were very different. But there is a big synergy, don't you think? So what really are the factors at play when you are designing your content strategy for this authentic millennial audience? Ritu, why don't you go first?
See, I mean, it's important to underline that at the base of any content strategy is, however digital friendly, however, you want to make it authentic, honest. It has to follow the basic tenets of journalism. The rigors of journalism and the balance of journalism doesn't go anywhere. I think one of the things that we're very clear about is that we're not going to confuse journalism with advocacy. I think balanced journalism, balanced points of view, bringing, again, like I'm saying, bringing the facts before this young audience and giving them the respect of having the ability to come up with their own conclusions or decisions on how they are interacting with the news. So that's the broad framework within which we work. Now, within that, the one critical thing is that the news has to be made accessible and has to be the same vocabulary, and I'm using the word vocabulary in a very broad sense, that the younger audiences relate with. So, just like Faye said, we are sort of no longer in the newsroom, but we have a sort of noisy, crazy, chaotic newsroom where people are, look nowhere like, no one's wearing a jacket, no one's got their faces done up, no one's even brushed their hair and they're hanging around their shorts, and they stand up and they do their, their stand-ups or their news bits in exactly the way they are. There is no filter between how they must dress to work or how they must dress and hanging around and that. So in that sense, when I'm saying vocabulary, it goes across to the visual vocabulary. I think what we are very clear about is that a lot of what we are covering as issues has to come from the younger audience. Let's take, for example, the whole NEP issue, the new policy. Most news outlets are telling you what the policy is, and they would go to one or two young people and say, what do you think about it? But largely what they're putting out is what the policy is. But for us, it'll be, we don't even have to invite it. We just get inundated with mails, stories, points of views. People record it because they know we do that. So now they are recording their videos. And of course, the fact that our journalists are out there turning their mobile phone cameras to themselves and recording their videos like that. So, it's just sort of that whole proscenium, that wall between the way a journalist can raise an issue or can communicate a point of view and the way a young person can, it's the same. So they send us, there was a time when we used to have to encourage people to send a video. They just send it. So in terms of the content or what makes the way we cover the issue of news is again, when it comes to young issues, is a participatory process. We love to fool around with new formats. So what you saw in the Rohingya Tasmida's video is we wanted to take away the whole, just too many videos had been done, and we had done tons of them ourselves, and the whole terrible living conditions and where they are, it was all about what they're dealing with now. And we decided that it's important to see the whole narrative of Tasmida from where she started to the fact that she's made it to a college as the only, she was the first girl to have made it. And so we fooled around with, and she loved the process because she came and she fooled around with us in the way we did the whole rotoscopy and the whole animation.
She's very comfortable.
Yeah, so because the person who was shooting with her is the same age as her, and completely understands her point of view. So balance, accessibility, honesty, no frills, saying it as we think it is. And if there is a journalist who's putting out her or his point of view, they say it as that. They sort of say where the fact ends and where the opinion kicks in, because I think that is one blurring that we are a little worried about, especially in what's happening in the news space today. Also, issues like gender, very, very close to us. We do a lot of content on gender issues, which goes more into the content bucket, because it doesn't have to be triggered by something, by an event in the news. Mental health, again, we don't wait for a tragic episode of a suicide, for instance. These are gender, mental health, sexual health. These are the kind of issues that we are covering, irrespective of what's happening in the news space. When we're constantly, one of the things that we're constantly telling ourselves is that you create templates to break them. So if we've not reinvented the way we're doing some of our storytelling, we know that we're losing it. Because see, with the change of with every new mobile phone that comes in, there's more features that helps them interact with content, right? So you need to be able to adapt to that. There was a time that Facebook was everything. Now it's Instagram. And people have completely, there's a certain cohort of people that's completely moved to Instagram. That's how they're interacting with news and content. But the core of it all is you do not deviate from the tenets of journalism. You play with, like I said, you even try and gamify it. Right. We've had fun with some of our politicians, or we've had fun with some of the other issues, current affairs issues that have been there. But and the advantage is that our newsroom itself is very young. I have been on panels where I have been poo-pooed, saying, "Oh God, you guys really overestimate young." I mean, because you see, if you do not have respect for a young journalist, then you do not even have respect for a young audience member, because the presumption is you don't know enough.
That's true.
The presumption is that you have to start. Where we do understand that the audience, that a younger audience needs to be brought on board is context. For instance, let's say the Babri Masjid or the Ayodhya issue. Now, a lot of our TG wasn't born when the Babri Masjid was brought down. So and that's where our explainers, and we do video explainers, and we do text sort of interactive explainers. We do a 6-part background video explainer on everything that led up to where we are at now with the whole, and now we have the mandir as well, or almost. So context is important. That we realize over time that context is, because otherwise news cannot be reaction to the immediate event. There's just too much neutrality that's just reactionary. It's just, the other thing that we are very clear about, and we find that gets us a lot of engagement, is investigations. Is to look where no one else is looking, to look. So if everyone's following one, there's just too much of that. One piece of news breaks and everyone's on that. And sort of breathlessly, and
so, sorry to cut you, Ritu, but we have 8 minutes to sort of finish a whole lot of questions for both of you. Yeah.
We have given you a sense to look at it.
Yeah, but tell me, Faye, doesn't online success mean a constant quest for likes, shares, understanding algorithms, even boosting some of your stories for better reach? Is there a constant tussle between editorial integrity and more eyeballs? Something like, oh, this won't work. This won't get us as many likes and shares. Or do you think when your audience is mapped, when your community is solid and they have faith in you, they can both work in sync?
So you're right. There is the way that digital media is functioning right now, the way the algorithm is functioning right now, is unfortunately very similar to the way television functions right now. Because every day there are 2, maybe 3 buzzword stories. So, right, I mean, it's either the temple or it's Sushant Singh Rajput, or one of these 2 stories. So, if you do something piggybacking on that wave, you'll automatically get a lot of searches, you'll automatically get a lot of clicks, the algos will push you, YouTube will push you, Facebook will push you, right? So, there is that. Also responding to what you had said earlier about news and content being separate, I don't think we have that luxury anymore, because when you're on your device, whether it's your phone or whether it's your iPad or it's your laptop, you're on YouTube or on Instagram, your news is competing with everything else, right? It's competing with the memes and the cat videos and the dog photographs and all of these other things. It's all on the same platform. So you can't afford to be separate. And I don't believe that young people are downloading apps anymore. I think they're tapped out. And most people are tapped out on their phones, right? You've got your apps that you want, and you're like, boss, I'm done. I don't have any room for anything else. So so basically now you're competing on a YouTube with all of the other. I mean, some of it is quite shocking, the stuff that happens on YouTube. But you're competing with how to cut an onion and all of that, and you're putting out news there as well. So it's a daily choice to choose between, you want to do the story that everybody's buzzing about, or you want to do something that's different. For me, I've made a personal choice, and I'm not saying that this is something that will work for everybody else. I've made a personal choice to play the longer term game. I believe that with every one of these decisions, you build your credibility for the longer term. Also, I believe that television has lost a lot of its credibility because it has sort of sacrificed its long-term credibility for tonight's TRPs. And they'll just do anything for tonight's TRPs. And I can give you like tons of live examples of when that has happened, and how immoral it is, because I think unethical is long past that line. We can't even see anymore. Now we're at immoral. But I think that if you're playing the long game, and if you choose as per the like you said, the tenets of journalism, what is right, what should be prioritized, what is not a story and has been completely fabricated should not be touched at all. So when you choose this way, you will be choosing for the long term, because you're building credibility and loyalty with your audience for the long term. Because this matters a great deal to the audience. That, oh, this is good, this is not good. So you want to be able to protect your decision making. So there is a sacrifice of likes and shares, but in the long term, I believe it will pay off. But it is also important to make your content, like I said, interesting. Write it in such a way that it's easy to read, it's easy to listen to. The length should be such that people don't feel like they, oh, it's too long, I forgot what you were saying in the beginning. It should be shareable. So when someone feels that, okay, this is interesting, I like this, I want to share it, it should be shareable content. So we're still trying to figure out a lot of it, but these are the things that I believe are important. One is to choose based on ethics and the journalist in you, and based on your conscience, make those choices. 2, be interesting, be shareable, and be in the right place. So like Ritu said, so tomorrow when the audience, and it's not it, when the audience moves from Instagram to the next big thing, we should already be there. And we should already have figured out how this next big thing is working. So we have to be where the audience is. They're not going to come to us.
That's the biggest learning in online journalism. Go where they are, and then they might just follow you. Coming to tech. Now, another aspect that really stands out in presenting online news is customization. The belief that different people have different preferences, and we should be able to give them their news. Tell me, how do both of you empower and enable your audiences through tech? We know algorithms. We all know a whole lot about how you're just feeding the same thing to that same person. Where is discovery and where is serendipity? Ritu, tell us about Quint, because I have seen you guys doing a whole lot of formats, a whole lot of reinvention using technology. And then we come to Faye, because you're in the process of building your enterprise. Where do you see the role of technology?
So, I think technology is critical, because technology is the enabler of formats. So I can't say as much to say that we empower audiences. The only thing that we do is provide a platform for them to express themselves. But tech is see, online tech goes way beyond just the, how do I say it? On online, in broadcast, there is a certain team that does tech. In online, everybody needs to understand tech. Everybody needs to understand. You can't say I'm a journalist, I don't need to know coding. You need to understand a lot of that, because how you're communicating and how you're reaching your audience has a lot to do with it. Now, for instance, the tyranny of the page load speed. If your page load speed is less than or more than 2 seconds, if it takes more than 2 seconds, you just fall off the Google search radar. So it needs constant tech to understand what makes your content easy to load. And that's just the first stop, right? I'm just going to the first stop. If your content doesn't load, you've lost the audience. Then you're presuming that I'm only being consumed on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and so on.
Right.
And that requires, the problem with that is that tech is not just expensive, it's also very, very slow. So keeping pace with the whole digital universe, because like Faye said, nobody cares that, you are an independent media house that doesn't have deep pockets, or you are a solo, outlet and you're just, a YouTuber. People don't care. You're just being compared with Netflix. I mean, seriously, today news is fighting for eyeballs with Netflix, and which is why tech has to be at the front. What we do with tech and what you're saying about formats, that's us just trying to be ahead of the curve. We're just trying to keep discovering, like I said, we keep trying to break templates, keep trying to find new ways of communicating. For instance, we did this a couple of years back. We did this letters from Kargil, which was the last letters that the Kargil martyrs had sent to their families. And we created a microsite where you could interact. You could write your own letter within the microsite, but you could also hear the letter. You could read the letter in an original format. You could read the letter, etc., etc. So basically, you got people to spend a lot of time in playing around and yet giving them information. But the larger challenge is the bigger tech. The tech for data, the tech for things like page load speed, the tech for enabling video content where you're not just leaning on a YouTube or on an Instagram. What's the future of video? If you're saying video is where it is, what is the future of video tech, for instance? I mean, one side of it is, yes, we're all doing mobile journalism and we're all picking up, mobile phones, but that's now 5 years old. What's the next thing? Right. What's the big thing? What is one of the things that, for instance, that we are playing around with is having interactive videos where you can go to that part of the video that you're interested in only. Okay. But all of that requires pockets that are deep enough because a lot of your budgets go into journalism. And we do a lot of ground journalism. So, it's not just that we're reporting out of Delhi, in and around Delhi and Bombay, you're going out into the interiors. So tech is competing with a lot of other things for the budgets.
Right, right.
And I think that's where the big challenge is going to be in the current revenue scheme. Sorry, over to Faye.
So obviously we're a lot younger than the Quint team as an organization. We haven't really launched yet. We were in fact, a fundraise phase. We were going to get a studio, get an office in Mumbai when the lockdown happened, and we discovered suddenly that we don't need either of those things and we're just going to work out of home. So I see us as a post-COVID organization. So we're already living in this post-COVID world without an office. 4 team members in their respective homes, we're just functioning that way. To go back to your question, the algo-driven news, which tells you what you want to know, I think is detrimental. I don't believe in that, that sort of news. I believe that we will wind up raising an entire generation of Indians who know more about European football than they do about what's going on in their own country if we only push algo-driven news to them and say, oh, you're interested in football? Here's all the football news in the world, whereas we won't tell you anything else that's happening. I believe in just curation being an important thing, which is to just pick out and prioritize what has happened and inform people about what's happened. So I don't, while it might be good for business, again, I don't think we're going to go down that route of sort of allowing people to pick and choose only 1 or 2 things, because there are specialist organizations that do that. I mean, if you followed goal.com, you would know everything about football and you wouldn't need to do it through us. So, and there is enough of that going on. So I believe that at this point, the need is to inform young people about everything and prioritize the everythings for them, fact check the everythings for them. technology, I think the challenge, which I believe a lot of organizations around the world are trying to figure out, everyone from the New York Times to the Hindu, and everybody else is trying to figure out how much to paywall and how much to give free. Because if you put everything behind the paywall, then then the tree is falling in the forest and nobody knows, because you'll do this great story and no one will read it because it's all behind the paywall. If you give out everything for free, then like you said, you have to sustain your journalists. If you want to be able to do good work, you need good talent. You have to be able to pay them money. They have to be able to pay their EMIs. So how are you going to break down the monetization to make sure that the people who pay you get something special out of the organization, whereas you're still putting out enough content to be able to make a difference and to be able to bring in more audiences and to be able to grow the base.
So
I think
Faye, just hang on to that thought. Just hang on to that thought, because Ritu has to leave. She has a very important commitment at 3:45. So we will not be able to do the Q&A with her. We'll continue with you after saying bye to Ritu. And thank you so much, Ritu, for your time, for your insights, and hope to do this again soon.
Thanks so much. I'm really sorry to be rushing off like this.
We will be missing you. We really need you here.
Thanks, Rajika. Thanks, Richa. Great speaking with you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Great to meet you too. Bye. Bye. Good luck.
Bye. Yeah. So, Faye, back to you. You were talking about tech.
So I think that, and I don't believe the breakthrough has come in yet. I believe everybody around the world is still working on how to monetize, how to be able to monetize journalism, which is a really difficult thing to do. Because again, across the world, the model of advertiser-funded journalism is collapsing. I don't think there's, all over. And so we're going to have to come up with a new model. I believe tech will play a large role in that. And we're going to have to figure out how that is. So maybe there will be a system where you pay for every article you read and it automatically just goes out of your account or something. I don't know, something. But there's going to have to be a tech solution. I don't believe it's here yet, but it might come. And I hope it comes soon.
A very important part before we go to the Q&A is fake news. Chu, can you please play the fake news video for us?
I can tell this is going to be fun.
Yeah, you do. You do know.
काले धन पर रोक के लिए लाए जा रहे 2000 रुपए के करेंसी नोट को बनाने के लिए स्टेट ऑफ द आर्ट नैनो टेक्नोलॉजी का इस्तेमाल होगा। ये एक नई बात होगी। 2000 रुपए के हर एक नोट पर NGC यानी नैनो GPS चिप लगा हुआ होगा। और अब हम आपको ये भी बताएंगे कि NGC तकनीक कैसे काम करती है।
Yeah, so really testing out this theory of the nano GPS technology became something of a mini cottage industry online. But the truth is that there's a huge human cost to fake news, and fake stories are spreading by legions of online trolls and unsuspecting users with dangerous impact. Faye, you have to separate from the wheat from the chaff every day. How, and you know that fake news is not a new phenomenon. A lot of people think that fake news has been exacerbated by social media, but that's not true. How do you see fake news being handled in India in the future?
I think, and if we're going to be completely honest, and I think that we should, what do you do in a system where a lot of the fake news is coming from government and has the blessing of, very powerful ministries? I mean, we have an Ayurveda ministry saying, oh, these are the various things you need to do in order to sort of, fight coronavirus. And you have to pull your hair out at this point, because never before in the history of news, at least modern day news, has news been so dangerous. Because if I believe as a citizen that I've gargled 3 times with this whatever jari booty that you've given me, and I'm no longer, vulnerable to coronavirus, I could just as well be giving it to other people. And while if I don't really care about my life, it doesn't matter now, because I'm now putting other people's lives at risk. This is the price of fake news, more than, the chips or whatever else that, I used to take gas out of the nala and make tea out of it, things like this, about, whether brain or head transplants were possible, or plastic surgery was possible back in the olden ages, which we don't even have a date for. So the sacrifice of science and scientific reasoning and scientific rationale at the altar of politics and popular opinion, I believe, is the most dangerous part for India right now. So India is facing a lot of things that the world is also facing. The fact that, we, just like the rest of the world, social media gets manipulated before elections, that people, put out these fake stories. I remember we did one, my colleague had done an investigative story when the Karnataka elections happened a couple of years ago, of these various websites that pop up for the period of the election that look like news websites and then disappear immediately after that. And they're putting out tripe constantly, right? And we actually went into one of these like political media cells where people are sitting there and actually designing fake news to put it on their WhatsApp groups. And I mean, that guy was silly enough to actually show us what he was doing. And it was like any other newsroom, right? There was one graphic designer who was designing this thing, there's another guy writing the copy, and they were putting out fake news. But I think that right now, even if we say, okay, fine, the world will find a solution to political fake news, but the lack of scientific reasoning and the threat to scientific reasoning that we're seeing right now in our country, I believe, is the most dangerous thing. So if you look at your WhatsApp, those groups, right? Everybody has them, sometimes for entertainment, sometimes to just see what's going on. If you look at those groups over the last few months, the kind of nonsense, that has been doing the rounds, including and until Sushant Singh Rajput's case, where people are just writing any crap and it's just going viral and everybody's sharing it, everybody's talking about it as if it were real. It almost makes me believe that there is a group of people who want to be told fairy tales and who want to be told that, ginger can save your life. I believe that that's going to be the threat. The lack of, it's going to push us as an audience and as a country further and further into believing that, chanting something and drinking something and gargling something is a replacement for medical science, or, is a replacement for simple rational thinking. And that for me is the scary part. I'm not, we can continue to put out information, but are we going to be able to tackle that? And how do we tackle that? So that's the big question.
Yeah, but that puts a whole lot of pressure on you guys, because you are putting out news every single day. So how do you decide that, and how long back do you go to the circle, to the cycle, to see that this is authentic and this is fake?
See, so we've got some great organizations doing fact checking right now. Like Alt News does great fact checking, Boom does great fact checking. So we can rely on those guys and sort of, we all know each other. So you make a call, you ask, have you checked this out? And they do sort of forensic Photoshop checking of everything that comes out to figure out where this video is from and stuff like that. So that's useful. At the end of the day, fundamentally for all journalists, it boils down to just verifying everything yourself, right? Either you are a teammate, member, make the phone calls, call the person involved, find out the actual source of that information, speak to the cop, speak to the family members, speak, whatever the story is. And that's how you verify a story. I don't believe there is a shortcut. And I know that a lot of people talk about how citizens can be journalists because of phones and phone cam and technology. I don't believe that's true. Because, for example, if someone were to send me a video of flooding, very simple, not political, flooding in such and such street. Is it from this year? Is it from some previous year? Is it from Mumbai? Is it from Delhi? Is it from like some other part of the world? It's impossible almost to fact check that. And if you were to go sit and fact check all of that, you're defeating the purpose of using a citizen journalist. So it makes more sense to actually just do the verifying yourself. So I think that, you know, good old school journalistic verification of everything can never be replaced.
Correct, correct. So before we open the Q&A, we just like to ask you the last question on monetization and revenue streams, because that is very important. You know, we are seeing this huge democratization of information, which is freely available across platforms. The ability to separate the wheat from the chaff, to come up with compelling smart formats for the audiences. If you don't have time, just download our app for headlines, or, you know, become an editor of your own news. That's a new one. You don't understand what's going on, here's our explainer. And Faye, you do that a lot, you know, yes. And sometimes I follow your explainers if I have to really demystify something. So by that logic, the value attached to this enterprise should only go up. Why is India not ready to pay for news?
Well, I don't know if India is not ready to pay for news. I think that we've basically been handing out news for free for so long that it's a behavior change that now has to happen. And I think it will happen. There are several people I know who pay for news because they're just sick of being treated badly by the news organizations that, you know, come to you for free. If you want news for free, you know, Republic TV will yell at you every night for free. Because it's literally free to air. There is no cost to receiving that channel. So you have to ask yourself, who's paying for this? If not me, someone must be paying for it. And what is the result of receiving news that is serving somebody else's purpose? So I think that over a period of time, audience members will realize that if they, going back to the point of authenticity that I told you about, if they want to be treated with respect, if they want their intelligence to be treated with respect, if they don't want to be lied to and taken for a ride anymore, they're going to have to pay for the service. I mean, tomorrow, if someone came to your door and rang the doorbell and said, I will service all your ACs completely for free, your first thought will be, I'm not letting this chap into my house. Because if he's doing it for free, then what is his motive? Right? That question now will need to be seeded in the minds of every Indian who has to now start asking, why is this person doing it for free? So who's paying them and what is their motive? And I think that it's a long road. It's obviously not going to be easy. It's going to be a long road. But over a period of time, we will have to change behaviors. There's no choice. There's no other option. Behavior will have to change. So at some point, all the independent journalists, all organizations like Quint, Print, all of these guys are going to have to come together and move the audience into supporting journalists. Because you don't support journalists, your democracy becomes really wobbly, and that's a dangerous thing to do.
And what are the current revenue streams? Say you are starting your own enterprise now. What are you looking at in terms of really a thriving business at the end of the day? Because you want a sustainable business model.
So we're actually looking at 3 or 4 different revenue streams, because I don't believe, again, anyone has the luxury of saying that I'm only going to do this one thing. Our primary revenue stream will be memberships that we will sell. And these are not subscriptions, these are memberships. So we're building a cult of young people who believe what we believe, who believe in, in saving the environment, who believe in LGBTQI rights, who believe in women's rights, who believe in talking about things like sex and mental health and all of these things. So we're building a cult of people who believe the same way, right? So once we create this group of members, and there'll be various tiers at which people will have members, will be members, and they'll also have access to us. So we're putting in checks and balances. One of the things that I believe is frustrating about journalism right now is that editors are not accountable to anybody. They do whatever the hell they want, and nobody's asking them anything. So we will put in an editorial board to which I will be accountable to the number of errors we made and why, and these will be senior journalists, and we create a report on a quarterly basis. But we will also do monthly and quarterly con calls with our members, where they will be able to hold the editor and the journalist accountable for what we have done, and ask questions of, why did you do this story? Why did you go with this headline? Do you believe this was right? Do you believe that was right? And we should be able to, be accountable and answer all of those questions. So members will have varied degrees of access to us. We will also work with brands on specific projects in which our aims are aligned. So if there is a brand that wants to work in the area of women empowerment, and they want to do research, they want to do projects, they want to do content based on research, then we'll partner with them on that entire purpose. So we'll partner with people in talking to young people about consent, talking to them about sexually transmitted diseases, talking to them about sexual harassment, about mental health, about all of these things, about the healthcare sector in India. And I know that there are many NGOs and not-for-profits that are actually funding this sort of conversation. So that will be our other revenue model. And our third revenue model, which is going to be events, which we've shelved for the time being, because obviously in this market you can't do events. But we will, once things open up, travel to smaller cities, to cities like Indore and Chandigarh and Trivandrum and Cochin and Mysore, and talk to young people about all of these things. I mean, imagine a room where we get 300 young people together and talk to them about drugs, talk to them about consent, talk to them about safety, talk to them about jobs, about careers, about, how doctor, engineer is not the only option for you. And these will be ticketed events in the sense that everyone who does come in will get a membership and they will get a ticket. So we'll keep growing our this thing. And our final, obviously, aim is that we will also look at e-commerce for within this group of members. And we will, come up with products that are intuitive based on the fact that we know them and what they want and what's happening at that point.
That's very interesting.
Yes.
Never heard of e-commerce and journalism. Interesting.
Yes. So we will, so we'll find different ways to be able to empower that group of people. And it's not like, so it's not, it's not one of those, you need to support us sort of thing. I believe that we will be creating a very viable, very vibrant organization with a lot of great people. And our final phase will be to launch in various regional languages and be able to take this service to young people in different states and who consume content in different languages.
No, we have no doubt, Faye, because yesterday when the whole world was talking about Ram Mandir, you did, a YouTube daily update on the impact of COVID on transgender. So obviously there's something right there. We'll just open the question answer round now. Rajika, can you please take some questions for Faye?
That was so inspirational, Faye, must say. You're brutally honest, and that's what makes you very special.
Thank you. Thank you.
All the best in your new venture. So we're just going to take some very quick questions, because if you see the Q&A, I think we have a lot of questions, and I guess over a course you have answered most of it. Some very good stuff where they really love your work. You're putting good news every night during such pandemic was the best decision. It really helped them to go to bed with a smile and relief in their heart. This is a person called Shubhangani Mathur.
Oh, thank you, Shubhangani.
Yeah, there's somebody called Fatima who asks, how do we bring attention of viewers to news that are of high gravity? Often news like education, healthcare, poverty, basic necessities, they do not get enough coverage. How do we reach a wider reach for these essential matters?
So actually this is something that always breaks my heart. So one of the stories that's very close to me and has been for many years is is farm issues. And I've always felt very strongly about agriculture and farming issues. I come from a farming family myself. But every time we do a story on farming, we see the numbers sort of come down a little bit because there isn't as much interest in it. But I think that if you, as audience members, you believe that there are things that you feel strongly about, then you must patronize the journalists who are doing this work. So read the content in that area, share the content in that area. If you can in some way financially support journalists who are working in whatever you feel is important. If you feel mental health is important, or you feel agriculture is important, or education is important, then find the organizations and the journalists that are doing work in that area and support them financially. Read their content, share their content. That's fundamentally how you will then give them steam to continue doing the work, because that's where the revenue will come from.
I agree. There's someone called Shubham who says, in your respective opinion, given the rapid pace at which digital journalism is growing, what do you think is the future of TV journalism?
You want the brutally honest answer? in its current in its current avatar, TV journalism in English has no future. It might continue to exist when it is sponsored by political parties to run agendas. But if you're talking about journalism in the true sense of what journalism is, it has no future on television. And I'll tell you why very quickly. One is because the English-speaking audience in India has switched out of television. They're no longer going back to the boxes and switching it on. And I think this has happened now up to the age of 45. Sometimes even up to 50, people are not watching television anymore. They have OTT platforms loaded on their smart TVs, but they're no longer even renewing the subscription to their television DTH providers. So they've already moved to watch sports, to watch general entertainment, to watch movies onto internet-based OTT platforms. If they need live news, if something's happening somewhere, then they'll find it on their apps or their phones. So that's the first problem. The second problem is a weak economy. Advertiser-funded programming is coming down. Advertisers are not spending. So that leaves you then with your sole advertiser, which happens to be the government, state and center. And as a result, then you become reluctant to bite the hand that feeds you. And so you are no longer doing journalism because you can't. So if you're asking me, journalism on television, specifically in English, doesn't have a very long future in my mind. I mean, it's one of the reasons, it's one of the main reasons why I walked away. The other, if you're asking me, people yelling at each other every night in many boxes, I mean, that could last a very long time depending on who's paying for it.
Excellent. That's very brutally honest. We have Arun Dev Kumar who asks, are independent media outlets usually unbiased?
See, again, there are good eggs and there are bad eggs, right? And I don't believe you can paint everything with one brush because, like I told you, like I was saying earlier in one of those answers, that during elections we have like a whole bunch of these, look-alike websites that pop up. They do fake news and then they disappear after the election is over. This happens in every state. So it's difficult to say that all digital media is honest or all digital media is not honest. Just like you can't say all journalists are good or bad, or all doctors are good or bad, or all lawyers are good or bad. So there's good and bad in every category. I think it's very important as consumers of journalism to make up your mind for yourself, saying, hey, you know what, I like this particular organization, or I like this particular journalist. This is something or someone I want to support. And then go out and support. But to say that an entire category is good or an entire category is bad, I think at this point would be very unfair.
Right, right. We have another question from the same person. A lot of the alleged biased news platforms have ventured into vernacular medium. These channels are heavily opinionated. How will regional and vernacular media play a role in reinventing news content and usher in free thinking amongst the youth?
This is actually a really important point, because obviously while we see the numbers for English dwindle, we've seen the numbers for Hindi go up, but the numbers for regional content, the sky is the limit at this point. The kind of growth on digital and on television that we've seen for regional content is massive and across the board. Whether we're talking about entertainment or we're talking about, just news, any of it, regional is where the growth is. We have seen that if you switch on right now, regional news in almost any language, some of the Malayalam news channels are still fairly, stoic, but you will see them do all kinds of things at this point, because like I said, that's become the name of the game. But it will also, I believe that there are a lot of good journalistic organizations that are now looking at launching in regional languages. We will as well at some point. It's just about giving people that offering. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to offer good and bad, and you have to offer whatever the best you can and hope that the audience chooses you. There's only so much you can do to fight. If someone wants to watch that kind of television, I mean, we can't cover their eyes. We can just give them the best of what we can give them.
Absolutely. So we have someone who's also a big fan of yours, Abhilash Srinath. He says, hey, Faye, I'm a huge fan of your work. Thank you so much for doing what you are doing. My question is, early years news was a reliable source, but is it reliable now? And what should we do to pick up reliable news?
Wow. Okay. So first of all, Avilash, thank you so much for watching all of our stories and for supporting us. That makes a big difference. So that's always nice to hear. Yes, there was a time when we felt, I mean, I remember when my granddad used to read the Deccan Herald or my parents used to read the newspaper. We took whatever you read in the paper, literally. There was no question about it. Unfortunately, yes, we have reached a point where there are now questions to be asked on whether news is reliable or not. I find most of the national newspapers, in terms of facts, still in the right place. In terms of how they decorate the headline, raise a couple of eyebrows once in a while. But there are fewer examples of fake news on our national newspapers than there is maybe in television. Like I said, I believe also the audience has and forgive my French, has a very strong bullshit meter. You are able to tell when you're being lied to. You just know instinctively that this is what's being said is not right, or it's not fair, or and when you know that, then change the channel, switch off the TVs, or stop reading content from that particular organization. I think a good yardstick, and the yardstick that I use, is that we have to keep reminding ourselves that journalism is by definition anti-establishment. Just like cops are anti-robbers. It's just that this is the way the job is designed, right? So if you have a cop who is pro-robbers and pro-crime, that's a really bad cop. So journalists have to be anti-establishment. There's no other kind of journalist. So by anti-establishment, that's not just government, that's police, that's very rich corporations, that's any sort of government agency, that is, any sort of structure that lords over the people is establishment, and journalists have to be digging at the underbelly of these establishments all the time. That's the job. If you find a journalist not doing that and not treating all establishment equally, then you start to raise questions on whether or not this journalist is actually doing their job. So a lot of people actually write to me, and this is a good question to answer, and I try and bring it up as regularly as possible, saying, you're always complaining and finding like bad things in the system. Why can't you celebrate some of the good stuff and clap? And I'm like, it is not my job to clap. There is a individual called a public relations officer in every government department, called a PRO, who's being paid out of your taxes. It is his job to clap. It is not my job to clap. My job is to find the next problem and the next problem and the next problem, to keep at it until problems are solved, to keep at it until every citizen gets justice. I mean, I would love a day when we run out of things to talk about and then we just have to sit and clap. That would be ideal, but it might be a long way off. So it's very important for people to realize that when you switch on any news program and you see the journalist clapping, verbally or sometimes recently singing or physically clapping, then you have a problem, because journalists are not supposed to clap. I remember my first editor taught us that we went to press conferences. You are not to clap. Journalists don't clap at press conferences. We're not happy about anything. That's the job. Being grumpy is part of the job. So it's important as audience that we keep reminding ourselves that, this is the nature of the job.
Sure. I have a very interesting last question. There are many more questions, but I don't think we'll write to them separately. There's a lady called Pritha. She says, is it really scary for you, Faye? Have you been threatened because of your honesty that you share news?
Not recently.
Okay. All right.
And in the general interest of being safe, let's leave it at that.
I'm sure. Any message that you'd like to give aspiring journalists, since all of them are watching your show and they all are praising it a lot? They're there to support you. So if there's
my advice, I have two pieces of advice, and I get asked this question again a lot for young people who want to become journalists. Remember that you can change the world. Don't ever let anybody believe that you cannot change the world with journalism, because you can. And it's only that feeling that will make you get up in the morning and, get dressed and get out of the house. The fact that you believe you can change something, right? Choose your first job based on the editor and not the organization. So you will get a lot of job offers. Hopefully, I'm hoping when this market recovers again, do not choose the big fancy name or the best salary. Choose the best editor, because your first editor will really lay the foundation of who you will be as a journalist and teach you right from wrong and teach you how to deal with every single situation and with different people. And a bad editor, an editor who is not big on ethics, will break your idealism and will, I've seen so many young people who